Okay. Okay, so about 2 years ago now, I undertook training with Education Scotland on a training course called Building Racial Literacy, and it's quite a big course now across Scotland, and it's for teachers and practitioners from universities, from unions, from schools, and it's in how to engage with anti-racist literature and how to bring that into our classrooms and engage our learners in anti-racism as well. And this slide I have stolen from that course, and I think it's a really important slide, and it's important anytime I think that we're discussing racism or anti-racism with a group of people, and it's about creating safer, braver spaces. And basically what it means is throughout this session that I'm going to have with you, I do understand that it might it might cause some negative emotions from some people, because we might talk about some things that might make people feel uncomfortable. So there might be a bit of discomfort. And so if that happens, it's okay to remove yourself for a wee while, shove the volume off for a wee bit, go away and get a cup of tea and then come back if there's anything that I'm talking about that makes you feel, uncomfortable. And that's why that self-care is there as well. Just so think about that. Think if there's something that's coming up. If you want to voice why you're uncomfortable with it, that's absolutely okay. But obviously within this, we're trying to grow and learn about racism and anti-racism. And so sometimes it's important to embrace that discomfort that we have. And through this, myself and Jane are trying to build a relationship with some of the parents that we have within our school. So this is why we're doing this. So just to keep in mind that we are trying to create safer spaces, and this is a safe space within this meeting. It is a space where you can speak out and say what's on your mind, and we'll try and acknowledge that and try and meet you in the middle and discuss that. Okay, thanks, Leanne. Okay, so I've got a couple of quotes here from a book called Blackout here. It's a fairly new book. It was just published in 2022, and I'm just going to give you a wee minute to read over these quotes. Okay. So basically, the reason why I put these quotes in is just to highlight the fact that racism in Scotland is here. It does exist. There is a bit of an attitude, particularly I'd say in the west of Scotland, where people make Glasgow and we're all Jock Tamson's bairns kind of thing, and everyone's welcome here, and we've got our new Scots policy for our asylum seekers and our refugees and our new arrivals in the country, and that's all great, but it doesn't mean that racism doesn't exist within our country. And the second quote there shows that racism exists within our schools as well, and it's something that we really have to consider, we have to think about, and it has to be addressed. And that's accurate for Glasgow as well. Okay, so if we go on to the next slide, please, Leanne.
However, your starting position in this race will be decided by the answers to questions that we are going to be asking you.
Sorry, what? It's a joke.
This activity is intended to explore how society favours one race over others.
People often confuse white privilege with being wealthy or being rich, and it isn't about that. What it's about is the absence of having to live with the consequences of racism.
Now, if the question applies to you, you will take a big step forward. If the answer to the question doesn't apply to you, you stay where you are.
I better win, man. Oh.
Okay, make sure you're on the start line. I see some cheaters already.
Yeah, fine.
Feet behind the line.
If English is your parents' first language, take a step forward.
Oh, yeah.
If you have ever been the only person in the room of your race, take a step backwards.
For God's sake!
If come from, take a step forward.
If you have never had to be worried about your family being stopped and searched, take a step forward.
I don't get worried about if people ask me to stop and search.
The divide widens, and the inequality of their position becomes clear.
This is just like not fair now.
Farah, none of us are white. None of us are white. It's unfair.
The last question. If your parents have ever warned you about racism, take a step backwards.
If we were about to start a race, is this a fair starting point for us all?
No.
Nakai, how do you feel standing there in the field of runners?
I kind of feel a bit alone.
Bit alone?
I can't really see. I'm literally just by myself, more or less. I'm just a bit frustrated and annoyed that society nowadays really isn't fair. And I just wish everybody could be equal.
Farah!
It's kind of frustrating that, like, me and Sarah are just standing at the back here while the majority of people who may be white are, like, standing right at the front. That just frustrates me a bit, because it's almost as in what society is today. I don't want this to be how it is, but it is, so it just gets a bit frustrating.
Henry, how are you feeling being right at the very front?
It feels quite weird because if you think about it, I think all of us should be at the same point, but sadly the questions, the way that they were put didn't favour some people, which I think is quite unfair.
On your marks. Get set. Go!
I'm going to talk at the end about some of the things that we're doing in Glasgow, and one of the things that we do is we do something called promoting anti-racism together in education, or party as it's called. And as part of the party kind of conference thing this year, we held some workshops for the young people, and we did something similar to this with some of our young people from primary schools and from secondary schools in Glasgow, and it was really quite effective. It was really it was upsetting. It was upsetting to see just how some people were realising, you know, how they are treated differently because of the colour of their skin. And then it was also for a lot of the white children, I think there was like a sense of realisation for them as well about their privilege and what that means as well. And so it was quite a powerful thing to do. And I think this programme's an amazing thing. We show this to a lot of schools when we're doing training and things with them, and I think it's quite effective for the schools and the young people to see as well. So yeah, thanks very much. So yeah, if you've got time, watch it though. Watch the programme, because it is very good. I think it's called The School That Tried to End Racism, and it was on Channel 4. Thanks, Leanne. If you could go on to the next slide. Okay, so this is again something that I take out when I'm delivering training in schools about white privilege. And this is just some examples of white privilege. And I actually got this from the Metro newspaper, and there was a whole load of them, and I think they're really effective as well. So you can see there just some of the descriptions of white privilege is, you know, being naturally able to learn about your history instead of it being confined to 1 month within the year, where it should be part of the curriculum. And I'm sure most of you will know that that's something that we're still trying to work towards. It shouldn't just be that, you know, Black History is taught in Black History Month. It should be, you know, just a normal part of the integrated curriculum, but it's still not there yet. We're not at that yet. White privilege has never been indirectly asked to explain where your skin colour comes from, not having to prove if you're a British citizen, not being overlooked to promotion due to your skin colour, not being expected to talk on behalf of and to represent your entire ethnic group. And this is something that I'm finding, being a white person who's delivering a lot of anti-racism training, that a lot of people aren't happy that I'm not a black person delivering anti-racism training, but I just feel that on the whole, it's white people behaviours that have to change. And so I think as a white person that I need to be leading the way with that as well. It shouldn't be up to black people to have to go out and tell everyone what to do. We should be doing it from, white people should be doing it from, we should be leading from the front on it, and it's not happening. So I'm unapologetic for being a white person who's delivering anti-racism training. I want to see change happen. I want to see white people changing the way that they act towards black people and people of colour, and so I do not apologise for going out and being someone that's trying to lead in that within Glasgow. When we talk to young people about white privilege, we also look at more day-to-day things that show white privilege, and that can be things like access to toys that are representative, books, or it could be even things like makeup or plasters or things like that. We talk about day-to-day things that reflect white privilege, and I know that a lot of people can find the word privilege really, really difficult to internalise and to take on. And I know even with the first time that I started really going into anti-racism training, and when I thought about privilege, I think I was thinking about it from a kind of social, kind of monetary way, and obviously that's not what it means, because I was thinking, I wasn't privileged, I wasn't from a particularly well-off family or anything like that. But once you dig deeper and really, look under the surface and think about what white privilege actually is, then yes, we are very privileged as white people, and that's something that we have to teach our young people about, that they have some self-realisation about that. Does anyone have any questions or anything about that before I move on? No, thanks, Leanne. We'll move on to the next one then. Okay, so I'm just showing you these because this again is something that I share while I'm out and about delivering training in Glasgow. And again, this is something that I got from the Building Racial Literacy course, and I think it's a really interesting way to think about your anti-racism journey, and it's just thinking about where you are within that anti-racism journey. So you can see that there's an anti-racism journey as a white person, and then there's also an anti-racism journey for a person of colour. And it is a long journey to become an actively anti-racist person. And I think before I embarked on some proper training in anti-racism, I thought myself that I was an anti-racist person, and I think I was non-racist. But now I feel I'm more actively anti-racist. I'm more prone to call people out or call people in or whatever if they say something that I find quite offensive or find to be racist. Whereas before, I think I would find it a challenge to open my mouth and say something. But one thing that I think is interesting about this, particularly in the white person one, is sometimes when we deliver training in schools or whatever, and we speak to certain members of staff, one of the first things that they'll say to us is I'm not racist because I don't see colour. Colour doesn't matter to me. But actually, if you look at the anti-racist journey as a white person, then if you look right down at the bottom at number 1, that is the bottom of the journey. That's the starting point of the journey, not seeing colour. And so again, it can be such a climb for some people to realise that their way of thinking, their point of view isn't actually the correct point of view, and they're actually right at the bottom of their journey, and they've got a lot to do to become anti-racist. So I just wanted to show you that, because that is something that we share as I'm delivering training throughout Glasgow, and I do think it's a really effective wee tool for people to look at, to think about where they are in their journey and how they can improve as a person as well to become more actively anti-racist. Okay, thanks, Leanne. Okay, so in June 2022, I went away out and I went to some primary schools in Glasgow. I'm not going to tell you which ones I went to, keep it quite anonymous. And I visited quite a few schools, and I had a chat with staff, and that was all staff, so that was teaching staff, Jannies, cleaners, support for learning workers. I spoke to dinner ladies if they would come and talk to me. I spoke to some parents within the school. I had a parent questionnaire as well. I managed to speak to some parents one-to-one, and I spoke to some pupils as well. So we spoke to pupils from P1 up to P7. We did try some nursery pupils, but it was absolutely hopeless. They were too busy talking about their shoes and the chairs they were sitting on or whatever else. So we just didn't really get anywhere with them. And what we did was we asked them these questions that you can see on these in these 2 little boxes here. The questions were sent out to the schools before we went out, so it wasn't as if I was springing it on them, or there wasn't like they had time to think about their answers before they came and spoke to me. And what I was hoping to gather was a kind of snapshot of what the thoughts are on racism in schools, what's happening with regards to racism in schools, how much racism do we see in the schools, and then what's happening to combat that. What solutions are we coming up with? What anti-racist practices are there taking place within our schools? So as you can see, it's not really been anything like too tricky, but I was just trying to dig a little bit deeper to try and understand what was happening within the schools. And as we go on throughout this presentation, you're going to see some of the feedback, some of the things that were said within the schools. I also should say that when I'm out delivering training now, the staff questionnaire I put on at the end of my training session. So I've got a lot of up-to-date information. So that's constantly getting updated via an electronic a form, an electronic survey. So I keep updating the information from that. So although some of this took place in June 2022, we're trying to update information all the time. Okay, thanks, Leanne. Go on to the next one. Okay. So what you see here is some of the responses that we got back from the pupils from talking to them. So I'm just going to talk around these for a wee minute. So if we start at the top left up there, so the pupils did note lots of differences between them and their friends. The pupils, particularly the younger pupils, rarely mentioned skin colour or ethnic background or religion or anything like that. They talked more about their likes and their dislikes and what kind of people they were, whether they were kind or funny or, kind of daft or whatever, or quiet. They talked more about that than they talked about even if they spoke different languages. That didn't really seem to be an issue with the pupils when we were talking to them. It wasn't even something that really thought about. The pupils didn't really use the terms black or white when describing their peers. It just wasn't something that kind of came up. When we talked to pupils of colour, they weren't offended when people asked them about their culture as such, including like clothes and hair. They really enjoyed having the opportunity to talk about this with others. And since carrying this out, I spoke to quite a lot of young people through our anti-racism conversations, which I'll talk to you about at the end. And that's something that's coming out really strongly from our pupils, is they want to have more of these cultural type days where they can share information about their culture and wear cultural clothes and eat cultural food and talk to one another and learn from one another about different cultures as well. And I think a lot of schools are maybe a wee bit apprehensive about doing things like that because they feel it's a wee bit, ticky boxy, it's just this one day kind of thing. But actually what's coming from our pupils is that they love it and they want to do more of it. The pupils were really mature when it talked about, if a racist incident took place and what should they do. It wasn't just punishment that was key for them. Don't get me wrong, some of them were going on about phoning the police and all the rest of it. But the largest majority of pupils talked about how learning from one another was the key of taking positive steps. There was children talking about, if someone had mocked them for their hair or whatever, then they would like an opportunity to sit down with that person and discuss their hair and hair care and maybe why they're wearing a particular hairstyle or whatever. And they wanted time to actually sit down and learn and teach others about their own culture as well. There was quite a lot of pupils that commented that racism that they experienced wasn't particularly because of their skin colour, it was more to do with their religion. I would say that was particularly for Muslim children that were saying that, and a lot of them were getting mocked because it was Ramadan, and that was one that came up quite a bit as well. And so I think that's something that we really need to think about as well. Football's never going to go away in Glasgow, is it? It's always there, and it does have a massive impact still on racist incidents that were happening. And this was at both ends of the city. I went to both ends of the city, and at both sides it had a huge impact on things that they'd seen or heard at the football, and then this would come back into school as well. And it was very, very obvious that our pupils of colour understood far more about racism and racist issues and things. White pupils either clammed up when we talked about racism, or they didn't really know what to say. And I think that was because you could tell that the pupils of colour, that their parents had been speaking to them about it at home, whereas the white pupils, it was just not an issue for them. They just didn't need to think about it. And that was really, really apparent. Go to the next slide, please, Leanne. And then from the staff, this was what came out from the staff. So most staff knew that if a racist incident takes place and this gets reported to SLT, which then goes through a process of reporting on CMIS. There were terms being used by staff in the school which they didn't seem to realise was offensive. So there were certain groups of staff that would call any pupil with brown skin, they would call them a halal. They wouldn't take the time to think about, are they Muslim? Are they Sikh? Are they Hindu? It was just, everyone was kind of grouped under this kind of halal umbrella. And that's something that really, really has to be addressed, because that should not be happening. There were certain members of staff as well that would use terms to talk about people of colour, and when they were, I tried to address them on like the words that they would use, spoke to them and they would say, but I'm from a certain generation, and that word was okay from my generation, and they just kind of felt that they couldn't unlearn what they've been brought up to believe, which I wholeheartedly disagree with. That they can completely stop using a word that's incorrect to use and that's offensive to use. But it seemed to be like a kind of defence mechanism with a lot of staff, that that was the reason for using inappropriate language. Some of the staff suggestions to be more anti-racist and supportive is to learn more. So like visiting local places of worship, inviting different communities into the school so they can learn about one another, more representation within the teaching staff, which again, that's something that our pupils really, really want to see as well. But obviously this is a bit of an issue in denominational schools. And then again, keep involving football to tackle racism as well, because they know it's got such a big impact within our schools. Not all staff were aware with what unconscious bias actually meant. And their general thought was that they couldn't help it, even though the ones that they did know, that it was just something that was kind of ingrained in you to have these particular thoughts, which was a wee bit eye-opening. But yeah, that was kind of something that came back. Staff didn't really like it when you used the term racist incident. So when I asked them about racist incidents within the school, a lot of them would say that there were no racist incidents within their school, but then later on they would talk about something that happened that was quite clearly a racist incident. But I think it's that push to take it that one step further and actually report it. There seems to be a bit of a barrier against that across the city. It's just, do we want to start labelling children as racist? And in my opinion, yes. If they're saying or doing things that are racist, then that should be addressed. At the particular time that I went, a huge number of racist incidents within the school were centred around the Chinese children due to COVID. And a lot of Chinese children were getting a lot of racist abuse due to that. And within schools, there is equalities policies, which usually has an anti-racism element within that, and staff were saying that this was all being updated as part of the SIP, so it was becoming more part of day-to-day kind of school life, and it was something that was being looked at within the school, and it's got to be part of the school improvement plan to do that. So that's what they were saying. Okay, Jane, I'll hand over on to you now.
Right, thank you. Right, Leanne, next slide, please, if that's all right. Thank you very much. So I think in conclusion, I suppose, around this particular study that Christine was looking at, there's 4 key points that we're going to cover just as we finish discussing this particular part of our presentation. So obviously equalities and anti-racism policy is really key within the school, which we're going to have a wee explore of that. Looking at how does the reporting of racist incidents, what's the prevalence of the reporting of racist incidents? And actually we're going to look at that as well within the kind of Scotland context. What's the impact of the community around the school in terms of promoting anti-racism or all the things around that? And we're also going to make some suggestions about moving forward and explain how within Glasgow City at the moment we're working with a number of different groups really to push forward this anti-racism agenda that's really important for our learners. Sorry, you can probably hear my family in the background having an argument. No one else having that problem tonight. So yeah, so every school in Glasgow has an equalities policy, and within the equalities policy, we have to think about 7 protected characteristics. So obviously we're talking about race tonight, but we have age, disability, gender, religion and belief, sex, sexual orientation, marriage and civil partnership, and pregnancy and maternity within those categories as well. But we're focusing on race and how really that feeds into the equality policy, or how the equality policy should really be protecting people of colour. So in terms of the schools that Christine was talking about, all schools were aware that they had an equalities policy, and that is something that is mandatory within the council. But some had not referred to it or felt that they needed to refer to the policy. So Glasgow City Council has been through recently a revamp of their equality policies, and a lot of schools have been looking at that. We have something called a school improvement plan. Every school has to submit one each year, and so some of the schools that Christine had talked to had then gone and spent some time updating their SIP as part of their work in order to tackle racism within their schools. But inevitably there's quite a high staff turnover in many schools at the moment, for lots of different reasons within the city. So some schools have had to offer additional training then in terms of their equalities policy. But obviously policies are in place in order to protect, so really key and important. Leanne, would you mind moving to the next slide, please? Thank you. And in terms of reporting racist incidents, well, I want to talk about this more in terms of a Scotland-wide approach. So this is some facts and figures that have come from an article. I believe it was published in the Herald. Is that right? Yeah, it was.
Yeah, 2021.
2021, published in the Herald, around the reporting of racist incidents in Scotland. So I'm just going to give you a little minute just to have a quick read through that, and then we're going to kind of touch on key points around that. Only 2,251 racist incidents reported in 3 years. I think we could all agree that's probably very widely underreported. So we're going to pull out some of the other key facts and figures from this particular article. So 48% of teachers were saying that they were aware of a pupil or pupils who were expressing negative attitudes towards someone with another skin colour. I think that's quite stark. So almost half of teachers are aware that this is going on. And 24% of teachers, so what, a quarter of teachers only a quarter of teachers have said they've received training on how to recognise, respond and report to racism. So that's again a very low number compared to the number of teachers within Scotland. And 71% of teachers do not feel confident in recognising racial incidents, racist incidents, within their schools. So almost 3/4 of our teachers within schools are not comfortable at the moment identifying that, maybe bringing it forward to SLT, and maybe not confident in what a racist incident actually is. I think we need to probably discuss further what that can look like and some of the things that are would be deemed as racist incidents. So we've got a couple of examples just here at the side, obviously, where staff have reported these as being racist incidents. So a P7 using the N-word to describe another child, reported in CMIS quite regularly. Staff in the staff room talking about Chinese people and that they don't integrate into Scottish society, and someone feeling they were too nervous to respond to that. So that's someone who, if they were on an anti-racist journey, that they still are not at the point where they feel they can actually intervene or say something, or maybe just not confident enough yet. Maybe they feel they don't have the language for that yet. Leanne, would you mind moving that on, please? Okay. So these are examples of racist incidents. Now, obviously, it's a very small amount, but I think it gives us a kind of flavour of some of the incidents that should be noted as being racist. So a child in the class is being ridiculed because it was Ramadan and they aren't having lunch with everyone else. So it's not around skin colour, but obviously it's around that child's culture, and I think quite rightly should be recorded. Some girls in P1 and P2 are laughing at another girl's afro hair. And again, as Christine said, these things can open up conversations around maybe hair care, other things around culture, but often our learners, it's not promoted and therefore we're not doing it in schools, and something we need to look at. And many schools are beginning to look at this actually across the city. Some boys have been calling Chinese pupils names and saying they caused COVID. I think we saw a lot of that in the last 4 years. A new arrival, so that's a new child who's just arrived in the UK from Syria, sits on her own at break and lunch and every day, and the other children seem to be avoiding her. So again, that could be construed as a racist incident if that learner's been avoided because of their culture or skin colour. Okay. Thanks. Would you mind moving that on, please, Leanne? Great, thank you. So obviously it's important to understand the definition around racism, and I think as part of my anti-racism journey, which is what I'm on at the moment, through something called the Anti-Racism Support and Development Group within the north of Glasgow, it's really causing me to really consider all my viewpoints. And so I would have said I was not anti-racist, but what I came to realise, a bit like Christine, is that I was non-racist, and actually it's now that journey to be fully anti-racist. I'm on that journey at the moment. So what is racism? It's prejudice, discrimination, antagonism directed against someone of a different race based on their belief that one's own race is superior. So again, that comes back to maybe even if you don't hold overt views of white privilege, it still can be there for us. So we're breaking it down into what can these things include. So we sadly see lots of physical abuse, and those are things that are maybe more easily characterised and identified. Threats, again, can be easily seen. Verbal abuse, written, printed abuse, and again, that comes into now Snapchat, social media, texts. I mean, there's so many modes now for that to happen. Graffiti, racist language or images used. Lots of videos now on TikTok that are the same, that are doing the rounds, and people like them, and it affects their algorithm. Again, like, and you see more and more. Attacks on property and home, and then harassment as well. So racism is also an enormous problem, and it's something that now can pervade everything. Are we okay to move on to the next slide, please? Thanks, Christine. I think this one's for you, isn't it?
Yeah. So this is again something that I talk about when I go out to school, and it's just about the difference between your overt and your passive racism, and that's probably just relating to what you were saying there, Leanne, about the microaggressions as well. So, I mean, most people would recognise and stand against like overt racism, and which is, racial slurs, violence, and practice, like, blatant racial segregation and discrimination. But I think what we need to get across within our schools to our young people and to the staff within the schools is that it's like racial discrimination can be kind of disguised and shows up in subtle ways. So like you said, like it could be like implicit biases or microaggressions or racially coded language. And a lot of the times people say and do these things, and they're unaware that actually racism is what is at the back of what they're saying, if you know what I mean. So the list that you can see on the screen are examples of things that were said when I was interviewing some of the staff in the schools about racism in their establishments. And I honestly don't think a lot of the staff realised that a lot of what they were saying was racist. I don't think they realised, their actions were as racist as they actually were. So, like the first one I talked about, the generational language and things like that. And I mean, that was just a defence mechanism, I think, with them, like when I called them out for it and said, you really shouldn't be using that particular word. And then I think that was them, like, they kind of got their hackles up a wee bit. The racial slurs between learners being labelled as non-racist, I think this is a bit of an issue, and I think it's because in this particular incident, it was a white child had called a black child a monkey, but then they said that previous to that, the black child had called the white child like an alligator or something like that. So it was kind of, it was justified in such a way, and they were saying it wasn't a racist slur, when really it was, but, so it's like they're too fighting to take it that wee bit further. There was inappropriate jokes made by a member of staff in one of the schools using some quite inappropriate language. And this them. This was the lady was lovely when she was talking to us, and she's very well to do, very well spoken lady that was speaking to me. But and she was a member of staff from my school. She was just getting ready to retire, and she was telling us that you know, we were asking if there was any racist incidents or anything that had taken place within her community that she lives in, and what she'd actually said was, "Oh no, there's none of them that live in my community," and she kept othering, she kept using that word "them," and you know, and it was like an alien landing would have come in. The way she was talking about them, it was like a different race altogether was coming in. She just, and I don't think she realised as such. And I mean, she was actually saying, I mean, I wouldn't care if they lived in my cul-de-sac as long as they looked after their garden, kind of thing. But it was always them, and I just felt that she was kind of othering people of colour, and it was, you know, she didn't see them at the same level as her. And then that bottom one there, labelling all learners with brown skin as halals, and that was, you know, in almost every school that I saw, that, you know, that there was in particular dinner halls or whatever, then, you know, it was just all children with brown skin were being offered a halal meal, and that's just crazy. It is crazy, but it's just that a lot of the staff are doing all these passive racist things, and they're either not owning up to it or they're not realising it, and that's something that we need to dig into deeper, I think, within the schools, like talking about these microaggressions and what they're doing to try and address that, because it is offensive, and it does leave people, you know, feeling uncomfortable being able to talk to certain members of staff and things, and you want your pupils to be able to feel comfortable, and they're not able to do that at times. Jane, I'll pass back to you, and if you can move on, Leanne, thanks.
Thank you. So again, thinking about the impact of the school community and the wider community around the school, and how that can affect anti-racism or racism within a school. The surrounding community has a massive effect and impact on what happens in the school. Children spend around 80% of their time at home, and the thoughts and attitudes of their parents and who they frequently see is definitely going to inform how they think and how they act. Alongside this, occurrences in the local community will also affect how learners react in school. So if issues are prevailing inside school, then they're quite possible, well, they're definitely probably going to be happening outside in the school community. Some of the things that fuel that are issues around housing. Almost the idea that that would have been my house, but somebody else took it. And again, the othering of people, changing demographics. So we're in areas potentially was predominantly maybe potentially white, and maybe over time just housing's changed, other people have come in, and it's changed the traditional demographic of the area, can cause problems for some people. Football continues to be a big flashpoint, and that definitely pervades into schools as well. And then potentially who also runs our local shops and amenities. So just looking at some of the comments, in the school, the local corner shop, some of the customers will say racist comments to me about the other Asian staff. They think I won't mind because I'm white, but I do. I try to tell them off for it. Yep, and it can be very uncomfortable having to call out or call in, behaviour like that, but it's really important. I remember having to do it a number of years ago in a school where actually there was an incident where some staff had said something about another member of staff, and I overheard it, and I did have to go and call that out and say that wasn't right, and it was very hard and very uncomfortable, but it was the right thing to do at the time. Just check if there's any more comments right now. Okay, people don't realise, right, okay, so people say that to you, or speak around you, but they don't realise your daughter. Okay. Yeah, which happened recently with a Glasgow councillor. Okay, I'm really sorry to hear that. It's just not all right, not okay. Okay, and can we just move on the slide, please, Leanne? Thank you. I think it's really important when we consider the impact of this study and all the things that we've discussed tonight. That, I mean, it's predominantly Christine's work. In fact, it is Christine's work, and she's been out and spoken to these schools. We've heard about how it's impacted upon equalities policies, how it's impacted on lots of other things around learners, and how we also need to view that within the context of community. I think it's important just to take a wee minute to answer some of these questions in our head potentially, or even in the chat a little bit. Are you aware of any racist incidents that have taken place around your school community? Are there new families there that are made to feel welcome? I think a lot of schools are working very hard towards welcoming families well. I think it's become a big focus within the city. We do a lot of work with that within our teams, and actually even making sure that we're capturing people's languages correctly, and that we're also capturing people's names and how to say them is very important, so that we're able to make people feel like they belong and that they're welcome. There's nothing worse than someone continually saying your name wrong because they haven't made the effort to potentially learn it. Does the school engage with the local community? So some schools will do that more than others, and there's various barriers towards that as well. But it's just, what do you see within your school community? What happens in the school to ensure everyone feels welcome? So are there celebration days potentially? Are there times when language is celebrated? Are there culture days? Does everyone feel like they have a place? Does everyone feel like they belong? Can they see themselves in the library books that are offered? Can families see themselves in the languages that are on display? Can families see themselves in the pictures that are around the school? I suppose it comes into how well are our learners represented within their school community as well.
Jane, can I just jump in from a parent council's point of view?
Absolutely.
Because this session was predominantly aimed at parent council members, and I think it's great that we're hearing all this stuff that's happening within our schools, but I think we also need to address that parent councils have a part to play in this. And one thing that Glasgow City Parents Group has created is a way of being able to not just welcome new Scots or minority ethnic parents into your parent council, but any new parent. I mean, it just adds another layer if English is additional language, or you're from a different culture and you're maybe walking into a room that's full of predominantly white faces that have been working with each other, maybe for a couple of years, that have all grown up with each other, etc. That can feel like a very unwelcoming space when you might not mean it that way as a parent council, but it can be really intimidating. So when we're talking about a lot of this, think about your own parent council. Think about when you have your meetings on, are your meetings welcoming? Or do you kind of fall into that habit where new parents join your meetings, you say, hi, nice to meet you, you maybe exchange names, and then you just fire straight into your meeting. You're talking fast, you're using jargon that they might not know, and you're not checking in with the new parent in the group to check if they're following the meeting, if they understood everything. Do you follow up with them after the meeting to check how did they feel? How did they find it? Is there anything you can do to help them? And I think as parent councils, we can be quite guilty of just assuming that everyone knows what to do in that room. And then what you'll find is quite often a new parent that's joined that group, if they've left and they've not felt welcomed and supported, they'll probably not come back and they'll not engage with you again because they've not had a really positive experience. So we do have a buddy model that we use that I just want to remind everybody we're happy to share with anyone who's interested in that, and how best to support and encourage new families to join their parent council.
That's really positive, Leanne. And I've been recently visiting various schools talking about how to involve parents beyond just the initial involvement. So we're looking at actually true family learning and parental engagement. So I've been speaking to quite a lot of different schools around your buddy system, and I think potentially I think it's something that's going to really take off next year with a number of schools that are starting to gear themselves up towards that. I think it's also really important when we welcome new families and new people, especially to parent council, that you're also very clear on how accessible meetings can be in terms of language as well. I know that's something you've talked about, Leanne. Really
Well,
key.
I'm also going to record me and Catherine Farrell, who is on the call at the moment. We've been recording kind of shorter versions of parent council training that we're calling parent council priorities. So these videos are like kind of 10 to 13 minutes long. And I'm going to record one about that buddy model so that we can share that a wee bit wider as well. So hopefully we can try and get more information out there, because I'm conscious that sometimes it gets lost in the barrage of information that our group shares.
I think it's really positive, and certainly, I mean, I'm in a great position at the moment to visit lots of different schools, and having these conversations a lot. And there's a real will within schools to engage EAL parents and parents who come from minority ethnic backgrounds within the parent council. There's a desperation for it. Over and over again, I'm hearing head teachers say to me, we feel like we're just not really representing our parent body, and they're really keen to engage parents. And I think it's something that, I mean, it depends on the area and school context, but there's a will for it, and people are trying to make a change. And I think your buddy system and all the other things that are happening around the Glasgow City Parent Forum group is really beneficial for those school leaders as well. Really, really important. And where we can certainly tie in with you, let us know.
Yep.
Right, I think we're handing back to Christine for the next slide, is that right?
Yeah, that's great.
Thanks, Christine.
Okay, so the suggestions moving forward from the staff, and if you actually look at both of these, the staff and the pupil suggestions kind of tie in. So it's about raising awareness about different cultures, staff training. So the staff do want to be trained, they want to know more about how to deal with anti-racist incidents. And I know that that's something that the council is moving forward with at the moment, is to try and train staff even further about racism and anti-racism. More awareness raising about racism, highlighting good practice, so that learning from other establishments, learning from peers and things to see how it's working, trying to bring the communities together, just what you've been talking about there, ensuring the parent council is more diverse staff, and then the implementation of the 1+2 languages, so that there's more community languages within the school. And the pupil suggestions, so yes, some of them did say zero tolerance for racist bullying, so if nothing is done, then they'll just keep doing it. But they also want to talk to those who have done something racist and let them learn more about other cultures, which I thought was a really mature attitude to come from the students as well. They all enjoyed being able to be part of like inequalities committee, because it allowed for their voices to be heard. Making sure that the school values incorporate racism, and that it'll know that like through the school values that racism won't be accepted. And then more lessons about different cultures and races. Someone's just asked about what was that question there about community languages being taught. So there is a policy within Glasgow about 1+2 languages, and you know what I mean, it doesn't have to be that they're fully taught, within Arabic or Urdu, Punjabi or Mandarin or whatever, but it could be something that's used more within the school. So I know as an EL teacher, we promote things like language of the month or language of the block. So it's something that could be used as part of the 1+2 languages initiative. There could be a focus within a particular language. If there's a really prevalent language within the school, then there could be a little bit of teaching and learning within each of the classes to use more of that language. We encourage our EL learners to be able to use their home language within their classrooms when they can. And so I don't think there would be anything wrong with trying to encourage the other learners to speak a wee bit of the home language of some of the other kids in the class. And so it is policy that although they'll be speaking English, they're maybe learning, one of their modern languages such as French or Spanish or German or Italian or whatever, that they might also explore some of the community languages within the school. And it's not that there's an exam or whatever on that, but it's just something that the school could choose to explore as well. And I think it would be really positive for a lot of our EL learners who speak a lot of those community languages. If we can move on, thanks, Leanne. So we put out a questionnaire in June 2022 for some of the parents. So this is put out, I think Leanne shared it, and then every school that we visited, they also sent out the questionnaire to the parents within the schools as well. We got a not bad response, but what you can kind of see from this is that I think it's fairly positive actually when you look at it. So although that there is evidence to show that there has been racist incidents within the school and within the community, there also shows that the parents feel comfortable reporting the racist incidents to their child's school, like the majority do, and a lot of them feel comfortable reporting racist incidents to the police as well. And then a lot of parents were aware of the anti-racism policy within their school, but most importantly, the majority of the parents either agreed or strongly agreed that they felt welcome within the school environment. and felt welcome within the local community. So it was generally a positive response that we got from the parents that completed it, and it was generally it seemed to be an accurate response. There wasn't a lot of mad responses in it, shall we say, because I know that they've tried to release it a couple of weeks ago again, and there was a bit of a worry because it was on an open forum that it might attract, some of the wrong type of responses or whatever, or, not the correct kind of people that it was aimed at. But yeah, when it went out the first time, it definitely, it was quite positive information that came back. But I do have to say that went out to not just BAME parents, that went out to like all parents within the school as well. Okay, if we can go on to the next slide, Leanne. So alongside that, via Leanne, I managed to get in touch with a few parents, and I did some one-to-one interviews with these parents. So we sat down and had a bit of a chat about racism and what they'd seen and what they'd experienced, and you can see what came back from that here. So you can see that parents did say that there had been a number of racist incidents in schools that either themselves or their child had experienced. And then if we go on to the next slide. You can see that most of the parents said that they would speak out on behalf of their children. And then thinking about, we talked about also, within the community. So if something happened in public, they would speak out. So I think they were thinking more about calling out a racist incident if they'd seen something. However, if they were on their own, they wouldn't feel safe. And this particular parent had a positive view of the police and hoped that they would be, receptive to supporting them if there was a racist incident as well. And then if we move on to the next slide, we can see what the parents that we spoke to thought should be done to tackle racism within the schools. And again, you can see a lot of this is linked back, so that there is a common train of thought from the staff to the pupils to the parents. So diversifying the staff to reflect the pupils, help children learn the disadvantages of racism so that they can avoid it. The school should promote different cultures so that the kids grow up learning about different religions and different cultural celebrations, talking about race and being respectful and being aware of each other's differences, and promote no tolerance to racism and have it shown somewhere that every child and parent can see to let them know that they can feel safe. So you can see that a lot of it links in. Everyone does have the same type of thoughts. It's just we're trying to put it into practice now. Which brings me on to the next bit of our presentation. If you can move on to the next slide. So what is Glasgow doing to address this? So this is just what I'm going to talk you through just now. So if we can go on to the next slide, Leanne, please. So the main thing I would say that Glasgow is doing at the moment is they've produced the anti-racism charter, which has been handed out to every school within Glasgow. And this charter is supposed to be a commitment from all our schools in Glasgow to take steps of things that they can do to take steps to become more anti-racist within their practice and within their day-to-day, things that they do within the school. So I'll give you a wee second to look over that. Okay, so what I'd like to say is that I share this when I go out with my training with staff. Sorry, Leanne. So share this with staff when we go out to training, but we also have a kind of child-friendly version as well. So we share that with young people as well, so that they understand it. So this anti-racism charter is being shared for everyone within school, and I'm hoping that this is the first steps to sharing it with parents as well, so that you all understand what's happening within schools towards that as well. And then if we go on to the next slide. So earlier on I talked about promoting anti-racism together in education. So this is it took place this year. I just put some pictures from Party 22, which was last year's one. So this is a yearly, an annual event that takes place, and there's a showcase that takes place. There are workshops, for pupils, workshops for the teachers as well, and it's just it's a lovely experience for the children to come in and learn from one another, with one another, and there's an opportunity for staff to learn as well. And so this is a couple of pictures from that. And then if we go on to the next slide, there is a wee video of a boy that attended, just a wee short one.
It's important to talk about racism because you're not born with racism, you're taught it. So if we all learn that it's a bad thing and it's wrong, our future generations are going to know not to do it, and it's not going to exist in the future. So if history doesn't want to repeat itself, we should try and eliminate the bad.
Okay, I just thought that was a nice wee, thing that boy had said, and I thought it was quite powerful what he'd said. So he came along to Party 22, and I think it was a reflection of the day that the children and the young people that came along, they are looking for change, they are pushing for change, they want it to happen, and so I think we have to keep doing all of these things that we're doing to meet their needs, to meet the need that they have for change to happen. And so if we look onto the next slide, then we can see what's happening there. So we're now running anti-racism conversation sessions, which take place in the city chambers. So we run a primary session and a secondary session, and what happens with that is this year we've run 3. Well, we're just about to go into our 3rd session, which is after the Easter holidays. And these are run for young people, they're run by young people. So they come and they share and they talk to one another, they lead what we put together for them, they get the opportunity to discuss change, to focus on different parts of the charter. So the last time we were there, we were talking about the recording and reporting aspect of the anti-racism charter and whether they think that's effective enough, the way that it's working within the schools, and should there be other ways for them to report a racist incident. And there was a lot of ideas that came up. So for example, one of the young people had said that they thought there should be maybe a QR code. So if they've got their iPads, they could just be able to report it via this QR code. So then that would maybe eliminate some of the stress of having to actually approach someone and talk about it. If they could do it that way, then that's an easier way for them to do it. It would kind of de-stress the whole situation. And then there was talking about like the restorative conversations afterwards and what they should be like, and how aware should they be of what's happening, with the reporting process, and then with what happens next or whatever. So we want them to feel like they are the people that are making the change as well, and they absolutely are. Their ideas outweigh anything that we could possibly come up with, and so we're wanting to continue this into the new school year next year as well. And allow them, like I say, to lead on the learning with one another. And so as we go into the June session, we've had like countless number of schools, countless number of young people that want to take part, they want to lead on the learning for the next one. And so we're going to let them kind of run with it themselves to lead one another with how we can make change happen. And it's a really positive experience. And what else we're seeing from that is that the schools are starting to work together, they're starting to network and build networks within one another as well. We're starting to learn from each other's like anti-racism clubs or equalities groups and things, and take things back. One school came and they did their own survey with the primary group. They carried out their own survey. I was hoping to keep the information that they had to use for myself, but that was not allowed. They took it off me and went away back because they were going to write their own kind of report of what they'd found out from the day. So I just had to take pictures of what they'd learned. But it really is starting to push change within the young people, and it's really, really positive. And then if we look on to the next slide, the other thing that we're doing is anti-racism support and development groups. So as I said, there is the Building Racial Literacy programme. It is really oversubscribed. Everyone in Scotland wants to attend the Building Racial Literacy programme, and it's very, very difficult to go on that. So what we did was instead, we work alongside the Educational Psychology Service, and we've developed a number of sessions for teachers who are keen to explore their anti-racism journey and how they can move forward with that, how they can move from being non-racist to becoming more anti-racist. And so we've ran it 3 times this year. We run 2 sessions each time. So we run it in the north and the south of the city to allow teachers from across the city to attend. And it's had a really positive outcome. Jane's one of the members of it. So I don't do Jane's group, I do the other group. So
it's been an excellent experience.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Very good,
Yeah.
very thought-provoking and informative, and has made me think about things I'd missed before. It's been very excellent. It's been excellent, actually. Yeah.
So as you can see, we're really pushing for change. We're really pushing to like educate people. We don't want, when we think back to that article that we saw from the Herald, where there was something like only 48% of teachers that, you know, felt that they were aware of what racism was, or aware of what racism was taking place. But only 24% had said that they had received training. So we obviously don't want it to be like that. We want we want to reach out as many teachers in Glasgow as we possibly can and get them starting to talk and learn from one another. When we go in and do this training in schools, like I say, I'd love to think of myself as an advocate for change, but I'm only just the first part in the stepping stone. What we want is to get the schools starting to work together and to think about how they can move forward for change within their schools. But we are pushing forward as a city. We're trying to do that.